All right, we are finally back, and it is that time of year. Burning Man is here. So, in this episode, we are going to dive into the festival, its origins, what it's all about, and what's really going on underneath the surface through my lens. So, we're going to get into the good, the bad, the downright dark side that I have been feeling into with this festival, with Burning Man. But Burning Man is not just a festival. It is really a global culture. And we're going to really begin to unpack the actual beauty and magic, why it has gained so much traction, why it has spread like wildfire throughout the world, and why I feel compelled to speak into this because actually I had a dream about the Wicker Man following me last week. And when I woke up, I was like, what the heck was that about? That was really creepy. I did not immediately put two and two together because Burning Man wasn't really on my mind at the time. And then, of course, Burning Man was coming just a few days later. So within 2 days, I put the pieces together and I was like, oh, I see. And I saw this crazy reel that brought more layers of the puzzle, more pieces of the puzzle, the more layers of the picture together. And I was like, okay, I do think I'm meant to speak into this through my lens. Because, yes, I actually, while I have not been to Burning Man, I actually have been in that community. I have been to a regional Burning Man. I've been to Mayan Warrior events. Mayan Warrior is an art car and festivals around the world that were put on by different camps, different communities that are deeply associated with Burning Man. They call Burning Man their home, but it is really this culture where people go from festival to festival throughout the year, all over the place. So we're going to look at, the beauty and magic, those aspects, the incredible, synchronistic, transformative, beautiful experiences that people do have when they go to Burning Man and when they go to festivals, but also the escapism and the hedonistic aspects to it. So, festival culture is full of that duality, right? The beauty, magic, love, and light, as well as the kind of drug fueled hedonistic aspect. So, I'm also going to share why I feel I was blocked from actually going to Burning Man and why I'm grateful that I was, and why it never aligned for me. And we're going to kind of go deeper because, of course, here on the Heart of Truth podcast, we go deep into the esoteric aspects. So that's the kind of darker lens that we're going to look at this through. And honestly, I actually recorded this entire episode yesterday. Today is Saturday. It's the day that they burn the man, actually. Interestingly, I recorded the entire thing, and it flowed probably better than any other episode I recorded, and then realized when I finished that it had not recorded at all. So that was really interesting. But I kind of buried the lead and ended with some of the bigger points that I wanted to bring through. And so I'm not going to bury them all the way at the bottom now. You know, um, the world is burning, right? Literally and metaphorically, the world is burning. Is this really the energy that we need more of? If you saw the thumbnail, I put it right up there. Is it time to stop burning and start building, right? So my friend actually is in town and I met up with her and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I recorded the whole thing and it didn't record. And then she reminded me something that I said to her a year or two ago. I was like, we need less burning men and more watery women, or something to that effect, right? More of that divine feminine essence, more of that energy that flows, that nurtures, that grows life, not burns it down, right? So, is that the energy that we want to put our energy into? Building, it's very consumptive, building something only to burn it. Or should we really be focusing our energy, time, resources on building things that will last, on building the new systems and structures to build a more beautiful future for humanity? Because we desperately need that creative energy going towards something that is truly sustainable, that will truly grow and thrive and benefit humanity, taking all the ideals, which we will get into more of the energy that's actually incubated there. It's not all bad, right? There's actually a lot of beauty and creativity infused into the energy of this project. But rather than focusing so much time, energy, resources on something that is impermanent, maybe we're meant to be channeling that energy now into something that will grow. So, in this episode, we will weave a few different threads and topics and layers. So, we're going to look at insights on festival culture values, specifically Burning Man, what the draw is, why people really get so drawn in, and it feels like they're going home, truly. The beauty and magic, as well as the hedonism and hypocrisy, though. We're going to look at that. The ancient roots and the modern origins of the event, which has again become truly a global culture. And then the Luciferic glamour and bypass that I see, the darker side of Burning Man, the energetic undercurrents that are rooted in kind of darker rituals. And yeah, has its purpose reached its expiry? And I would be very curious. Please share in the comments below if you've been, what your experience has been. Please share. I would love to hear more. I know loads of people who go every year who are there right now. I easily, probably in a given year in the last several years, know at least 100 people, ballpark, but at least probably a couple hundred more who have been at some point in their life. So I do know that a lot of people have incredible experiences, but I also know that it's not all love and light. So just a quick housekeeping note. Welcome, by the way, if you're new here to the Heart of Truth podcast, welcome or welcome back. This is a little bit delayed, this episode, because I actually was under the weather with the worst things for a podcast, a little bit of a throat issue and congestion, which I'm still dealing with a tiny bit of the remnants of. So please bear with me if I am not my absolute full self. But we're going to get through it. And I'm also very excited to share that in the background, since I have not been recording this week, I have been really upgrading the back end of my inner temple, especially. And all of the resources are up there. There are so many resources, activations, meditations, in addition to well over 100 videos full of content, full of wisdom. And so there is so much up there for people to really go deeper and engage with. And next week is my birthday. Depending on if I even get it up this week, it might even be this week, and it's a big birthday. So I'm really excited to share what is coming, and yeah, so stay tuned, join my mailing list or subscribe. And yes, yeah, I have so much magic that I've been working on, and I'm so excited to put out there. So let's dive into it. So there is a lot of beauty and magic that people experience when they attend Burning Man or festivals like it. It's very welcoming. It's very open. People do genuinely feel like they're going home. So many people who go say, I can't wait to go home, or, yeah, I'm so sad I'm not going home this year, or whatever. I see these people's posts in their feeds. And yes, so many people have these incredibly profound, synchronistic experiences. They meet incredibly beautiful souls. And I have met some incredibly beautiful individuals when I have attended these events that are not actually Burning Man, but it's the same community. So you see all flavors at this festival, Burning Man especially. And everything and everyone is more or less accepted in all of their weirdness and all of their flaws and imperfections and all of their crazy stuff that they get to fully express at this event where they can't really do so in the quote unquote matrix, right? So that is one of the core values that most people there espouse is radical self-expression. Really just allowing yourself to be a version of you that you don't feel like you can be in normal society. And so there is this aspect of it that feels very liberating for the true soul's essence when done in a truly aligned way. And it's not just welcomed, it's truly celebrated. Most people there are incredibly welcoming, and they build a city of 80,000 people in the middle of the desert. And so people who go are really full of this radical self-reliance is another Burning Man principle. They're full of this energy of, creating something different, creating something new, experiencing something different and new, and wanting to really put their energy towards something beautiful. And so, community, art, self expression, self reliance, these are some of the core values and energies that you experience when you're there. It's a culture of art, it's a culture of self expression, as well as forward thinking visionaries and innovation type energy. It draws people who are very entrepreneurial, very forward thinking, very progressive, and who are actually, many of them, building things in the real world. So it's not all bad by a long shot because a lot of people are now familiar with the drug fueled hedonistic aspect, where there's orgies and sex and psychotic episodes, and it's not all like that. We will get into that. But the Burning Man principles, the core values that really drove the spread and appeal, I feel, of this event, of this culture, is leaving no trace, radical self-reliance, this gifting economy, totally different from our matrix reality, radical inclusion. There's 10 principles. I'm not going to list them all, but these are the ethos and the values that have really helped to build this community. And so there's something very, very beautiful about that. And there is something very aligned with the spiritual path that is driving it, right? So the co-founder, Larry Harvey, wrote down the Burning Man principles in the early 2000s, not as a dictate, but really as a reflection of the values that people who were in the community were really espousing, were really embodying at this event. And so there's no money. It's an economy based purely on gifting, not barter, although it is kind of expected that everybody will offer something. And that offering can be energetic, it can be artistic, it can be, offering a sound healing or something like that. And so it's really about giving something back to the community, and then the community gives back to you. There is this saying that the playa provides. And so if you need something, you can almost always find it. And so it really brings people into this energy of being in the flow, surrendering to the moment, trusting. And there's a lot of beauty in that, and it can be very transformative. People go for a transcendental, transformative type experience, and most people go with pure, genuine intentions of having this beautiful experience. Potentially, they're seeking some kind of transformative experience. They need to escape the matrix for a moment. And yes, there is something beautiful about that. And like so many things in our world, what has beauty and value and goodness has taken a twisted turn. It has become rather hedonistic and even hypocritical, many critics would say. Burning Man is not what it was. It's actually quite expensive to go there by many people's standards. It's all relative, of course, to be sure. And some people do find a way to be able to go for relatively cheap. And for a lot of people, they say it's absolutely worth it because of the experience that they have. But tickets start at about 575, last I heard. And those tickets, though, to be very clear, go within seconds, literally seconds. And then there's different tiers of pricing. So if you miss out, if your computer's just a little bit slow, your Wi-Fi is just a little slow, you're not going to get that 575 ticket. You're going to have to pay more, up to, I think, about 1,500, give or take. Don't take this as absolute, but this is the ballpark that people are paying for the ticket alone, and then the logistics of getting there, of all the supplies that you need, because you need to be fully self-resourced when you're there. Yes, the playa provides, but you have to go with the expectation that you're going to be caring for and providing for yourself, and you also have to leave no trace, take it all away. So you have to plan these logistics to a T, more or less, because you've got to bring your water, you've got to bring your food. You've got to be able to get there. And yes, people will get rides with people. I think there is a bus or a shuttle or whatever that will bring people in. But usually people are associated with a camp, and people come together and figure out the resources for the camp. And so for 3 weeks, give or take, because of build week and the takedown week, where they dismantle everything, it's really about 3 weeks where an entire city, an entire ecosystem, an entire economy is built in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert, where there are no resources, there is no water. And so it's very fascinating from that perspective. But it does truly take an incredible amount of planning and logistics. Many people will take their RVs, and a lot of people have a lot of thoughts and opinions on that. I really don't. It's probably the only way I would ever consider going myself. I'm not a fan of dirt, mud, and I'm not a great sleeper. So, yes, those are three big reasons why I feel, I learned about it way back in 2009, actually, before the Instagram influencers and EDM DJs totally took over, And yes, it's always been about music and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I will go, honestly, is to experience all the DJs and the music and the dancing. Dancing is one of my favorite things to do. It lights me up. It raises my energy. It lifts my vibe. And I love it. I love it. I love being right up there with the DJ. So this is not to knock that culture specifically, but it's like, what has it become as an aggregate, as a whole, is really getting further and further away from the core values, from the core principles. But also, looking at the origins, which we will in a moment, was it as pure and genuine as many people believe it to be? I don't know. I'm not going to make final judgments here, but I do think we need to look a little deeper. But this year, I don't know. I feel that God's hand is kind of at play here, saying, hey, because from the get-go, there were massive dust storms. There's been lots of rain this year. A couple years ago, it was similar. It was like mud burn. Although people handled it very well, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's gonna devolve into absolute chaos and anarchy, and people are gonna just be at each other when the rains came into the desert a couple years ago. And it was actually quite the opposite based on what I heard and saw. And, it's not all bad, but the orgy dome was destroyed this year, very early. And I just feel like, could it be any more obvious that God's hand might have been at play there, in my humble opinion? But yeah, it rained for at least 3 days at the beginning. I haven't been totally keeping up with all of it, but this mud, just so you know, like, the dirt has a very specific composition, and it cakes and gets extremely heavy. So it is no walk in the park. It is no picnic if it rains. It has serious consequences for your comfort, but potentially even safety for a lot of people, especially if you're in a regular tent. So there are real survival issues that come to the fore when things go wrong at Burning Man. The dust storms are crazy. You have to bring goggles and a face cover because you can have serious consequences if you don't because of the dust. And, just to me, like from a comfort perspective, that just does not sound appealing. But also, yes, the logistics and the practicalities of having dust in your lungs, like there can be potential health consequences that people have to deal with down the line for that. And so, yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole ordeal. And a lot of people say, well, that's just the purpose of it. That's part of it is going through the initiation, going through the fire. But is that really the fire of initiation that is going to have lasting transformation? We're going to get into that in a little bit. But looking a little bit more deeply, festival culture, is there a little bit of programming going on here? Many people are drawn in seeking freedom, seeking deeper connection and community with people who are more about free love and open expression. And that's beautiful. And I absolutely have experienced the beauty and magic of that. But I'll be honest, a lot of the connections I made in that community are not incredibly deep. And yeah, I would, if I went, I would probably hug, most of the people that I knew there. Like I would probably go oh, how beautiful and magical to see you here randomly on the playa. That's kind of the vibe. Like, and I have had those synchronistic moments of, seeing somebody that I hadn't seen in years randomly at a festival at a completely different part of the world. And it's super fun actually to run into people like that. It's super magical. And I totally understand that draw, but what people don't realize is they're getting caught up in a mass ritual that siphons their life force, and there's a glamour of ego overlaying this entire thing as well. So taking it all with a grain of salt, right? It really seemed freeing at the time. It gave me this sense of kind of allowing myself to step out of what the world that I was used to, what it was, this kind of more structured reality. And at the end of the day, though, in hindsight, I see that it wasn't really as genuine or as transformative as I thought it might have been. It was about love and light, but I see so much bypass in that because, yes, you have the drugs and people are getting taken over by entities or releasing their entities into the crowd. And if you're opening up, then you're opening up to God knows what these other people are bringing in. And then you have the aspect of the sexual distortion, the leaky energy, the orgy, free love, open sex type energy that is fueled by the drugs often in many cases, but this distorted sexual energy gets perpetuated. And when you enter Burning Man, I don't know if this is the case every year, but I've heard that this is the case, in some years anyway, that you would get handed a flyer on one side, where to go if you hit a point of psychosis, where to go for support. Yes, they have support systems in place, which is beautiful, but it's necessary because stuff happens there. Like stuff, people can't handle themselves a lot of the time when they go there because this isn't just a 3-day festival, which honestly is rough enough on the system and the body. This is a full week, sometimes plus, of being in extreme conditions, including surrounded by drugs and music and not being able to sleep. You can really only sleep in the day in many cases because, there's nothing else to do because it's so hot, but also because there's music all the time. I don't know if I'd be able to sleep, honestly. And that's like one of the huge reasons why I've been super hesitant, about full on Burning Man. But back in 2009 when I learned about it, I was like, it sounds really cool, but the dirt and the dust and the sleeping and the logistics, I was like, I don't know about that. Like, I'm not great at camping. I love nature, but I'm not great at camping. Do I really want to go camping in the desert? That was my thought process at the time. And then I started seeing how cool it was, and how people were having these really cool, fun, magical experiences, running around like a little fairy in the desert, like dancing all the time. I was like, that sounds like it could be kind of fun, actually. But, the flip side is that there's a lot of distorted energies, and not everybody is going in a pure energy and frequency. And there is a lot of distorted energy. On the flip side of that flyer, you get where to go if you hit psychosis. The other side is what to do if your boundaries are crossed and there was no consent. What to do if you were sexually violated, where to go for support. And unfortunately, that's a reality that is quite prevalent there. I don't know anything about numbers, but it's a consistent reality there. There is a real need for that support system to be in place. So, yes, it's sad. Out of 80,000 people, I don't know statistically how that would compare to another random average city that exists in real life, but that's not really the point. The point is that it is not all love and light when you go to this festival and are placing your trust, you're opening up. And yeah, honestly, what I also see is there's this kind of looping energy. Not to judge anybody. I know people who have gotten married there and are, just I see 1111, very interesting. I know people who have had, incredibly profound transformative experiences there. And I also see that there are some people who just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And not just at Burning Man, but going to the same type of festivals with the same people in different locations. And granted, they're cool locations, but it's like, okay, what are we really getting out of this at a certain point, right? So here we get into that kind of Luciferic glamour and that looping energy. So it's that false light experience of limitless love and liberation, but is it really liberating? It's kind of a mask, I feel, for siphoning, for bypass, and for kind of this glamour-based entrapment type energy that keeps people in these cycles, these loops, because looking at the structure of Burning Man, we're going to get into this Black Rock City. Black Rock, I talked about in my previous episode as well. Interesting coincidence there. But it looks like Saturn's rings. And so we're going to get into that layer. But the financial and energetic matrix. So, they talk about this gifting economy, but it's actually there's a lot of money that goes into this festival, and festivals generally as an industry are highly lucrative. So is it really spiritual liberation or just another layer of the matrix that seems like you're escaping the matrix, but it's really not? So we're going to also just go a little deeper into the parallels with the ancient rituals. So Burning Man is kind of like a modern echo of the Wicker Man sacrifice. And I mentioned at the beginning my dream about the Wicker Man. So I was like, okay, got to look this up a little bit more deeply. It's like I knew a lot of layers of this before, but it's like the full picture really wanted to be examined here. So then we're going to look at, the timing of it, burning it on Saturday, Saturn Day, right? And the rings of Saturn. What does Saturn represent? So this is really an inversion of the true fires of initiation if we're going to get really honest and look at it with eyes wide open. And so looking at the Christic fire versus the false fire specifically. So there's this contrast between that consuming glamour of the false flame and the true purification fire of the Christ Sophia, of the Christ flame. So it's that heart flame versus the pyre energy. So yeah, festivals really have become playgrounds of this false king energy. Little nod to our favorite person, Aubrey Marcus, who I did a previous episode on his podcast about radical monogamy, right? But yeah, we can see there where that radical term came into play, right? So yeah, looking a little bit more deeply at this Saturn connection. So the modern Burning Man, it culminates. It started with some kind of fire on the beach in San Francisco, but now it's in the middle of the desert, and it culminates in the burning of this massive wooden effigy, which they call the man, on Saturday night, Saturn Day, right? And Saturn, what is the archetype? What does it represent? So, esoterically, Saturn rules structure, limitation, time, control, and yes, karma. And so historically, it's been linked to these sacrifice rituals, Saturn or Cronus devouring, Cronus is known for devouring his children. And so there is this burning of the giant figure on Saturday, Saturn's day, where it's kind of like this ritual offering, this ritual sacrifice to Saturn. And is that really the energy that we want to be feeding, that we want to be giving our energy to? And then we look at the ring aspect of it. It's kind of more like a sea, but it's like a spaceship in the desert kind of vibe. Spaceship with rings, Saturn's rings. And we see that they divvy it up by time. It's like a clock. That's how people know where their camps are and where to find people and resources and events. They have this whole system, but it's based on a clock, actually, which is very interesting because of Saturn's rings and its association with time and karma, karmic loop, time loops. That's the vibe that I've been getting from it. So then I saw this really interesting reel about the different symbolisms associated specifically with Burning Man Waking Dreams 2022. So there was an image of Saturn, a reptile, a dinosaur, but it's like reptilian energy, right? The DNA in the center, the light of Lucifer kind of coming through above Saturn, this spaceship energy, which this individual said was like a fallen angel reference. There's a skinwalker as well, kind of odd amalgamation of symbolism right there, right? But it was very interesting because this came up right after I had that dream of the Wicker Man. So I was like, okay, tell me more. And so he was making these associations with different advertisements as well, and different themes that were coming into play at that time. So Coca-Cola had come out with a new flavor, like something dreams, and they had this cube on it, which was associated with Saturn's cube, the black cube, the red cube. So the black cube represents Yahweh's matrix, like the false, distorted religion, false kings of tyranny, religion matrix. And then the red cube represents the Metatronic false light new age matrix. So people often pendulum swing from one to the other, but they're still trapped in the cube, in the box, right? And so then they were making this connection with the Sandman, the show on Netflix, the series. If you're not familiar with it, it came out apparently in 2022. Interestingly, I had never been drawn to watch that one. And just 2 weeks later, I was like, I don't know. I'm kind of curious what this one might be about because I am drawn to shows and movies with elements of magic, fantasy, sci-fi, because yes, I like that kind of stuff. I love Harry Potter, but I am also often looking at it through a lens of, okay, how are they getting consent? How are they disclosing? What are they priming people's consciousness with? What subliminal messages are in there? Kind of from a research perspective. And I revoke all consent. At least I try to be really diligent about that. But what people don't understand when they watch these shows, most people, probably a lot of people watching this will understand this, but we give consent to these agendas that they show us that they're going to do through movies, through TV, through media, through social media, through the cultural sphere, celebrities, so on and so forth, right? And so they're getting people's subliminal, subconscious, unconscious consent when they watch these movies to these timelines of dystopia or weird agendas, right? So, okay, what was going on with the Sandman? Well, there's a few layers that were a little complex and confusing to me. But the Sandman was, it basically represents this individual, this god figure that controls people's dreams. Very interesting, right? Because Burning Man was called Waking Dreams, and they came out about the same time. And the character, the god, rather, I should say, in the Sandman is called Morpheus. And that's a nod to Morpheus from The Matrix. And it's very interesting, right? Is that just like a pure coincidence, pure random synchronicity, or is there something deeper to it, right? So, with those two very obvious elements at play, was there kind of this subtle message in the Burning Man Waking Dreams 2022 in particular that they were saying, yep, we're part of the system, we're part of the matrix? Because yes, I have been receiving deeper messages about what the darker energetic currents underlying it are really about. And what I feel is going on is that it has become a soul harvesting, soul even trafficking event. This is what they do there. People open up and they're giving consent to this ritual, and they have no idea that they're doing so because people are unwittingly opening up and unwittingly giving consent, because most people are completely unawares, unconscious to the fact that when they do these things, they're opening up to demonic energies. And, do these things, I mean, by substances generally. And that it's not a hard and fast rule that people are doing that, but that's often what happens. And that by being there, they are consenting on some subtle form to participating in this ritual. And what really happened? So they burn the man on Saturday, Saturn Day, and it's basically a huge party, kind of hedonistic in vibes. And then the next day they have a temple burn, which I'll get into in a moment. So it's a very, very different energy. There's something a little bit more reverent, but is it really truly of the highest frequency in alignment with true sacred energy? I don't know about that. But I just also want to be very clear that formally, officially, the act of burning the man, there is no ascribed meaning to it formally. It has obviously been interpreted as kind of this liberation from societal structures, the man itself, the system, the patriarchy, the matrix. So burning the man, that has been a very common meaning ascribed to it. So it's like this rejection of society, this rejection of the patriarchy and the matrix. But you could also see this as actually feeding those Saturnian archetypes through this ritual sacrifice. And especially since, the collectives are participating unconsciously, like they don't really know what they're giving their energy to, right? So symbolically, to me, it really does echo this Wicker Man idea, this large communal effigy that's set aflame that represents collective shadow work, catharsis, and sacrifice. But really, what is going on there is something deeper, in my opinion. People think that it's about one thing, but they don't realize that there is something a little bit more sinister underlying it. Okay, so where does the Wicker Man itself come from? What is the background of the Wicker Man? So the Wicker Man is most commonly associated with Celtic and Druidic practices, although the history of it is a bit debated, to be very, very clear, okay? So the Wicker Man is most famously recorded by Julius Caesar, where he mentions Druids constructing giant woven figures of wicker, sometimes allegedly filled with offerings that were live at one point, animals and humans. So, yeah, that's pretty effing dark, right? So they were then set on fire as sacrifices to the gods, and historians often argue about whether this was propaganda by the Romans against the Druids, because that could very well be what was happening there. But the archetype of this giant burning effigy really has stuck. Could it be that the Druids were slandered? Yeah, Absolutely, that's a possibility, but could it also be that the druids were infiltrated, co-opted, and hijacked, and, kind of this dark false priesthood energy infiltrated and distorted a lot of the practices? That could also very well be true. So I can't claim to know with absolute fact which is the highest truth of that, but this is where the origins of the Wicker Man itself originated. So it's a little redundant, but so Caesar described the Celtic Druids as filling them with these innocents and setting them aflame as offerings to their gods. So, yes, why is it so similar, this Burning Man effigy? Why is it so similar to this Wicker Man? It's quite dark when you think about it. And then the Wicker Man, there was a film that was actually this classic horror film, where a Christian policeman is lured into a pagan island community and sacrificed in a wicker effigy by fire. Okay, very dark. And generally, it represents sacrifice, fertility rites, death, rebirth, collective ritual energy. The burning can be seen as both destructive and transformative, but is this really the energy of transformation that we want underlying the burning, or should it be of true purification? So, to me, the death and rebirth and collective ritual energy, that's also a nod to the Saturnian, karmic looping. Are we meant to be in this cycle of death and rebirth? Are we meant to be continually reincarnating? A lot of people feel that that is part of the trap, that our soul isn't here to evolve continuously like this through lifetime after lifetime in this manner. That many people say that we are trapped in this matrix and that going to the light keeps us in this reincarnation loop. So is that part of the trap? Is this kind of a subconscious contract people are making at a soul level to continue giving their energy to this looping energy, to these cycles of death and rebirth and reincarnation, so that their souls can continue to be loosed from, to be siphoned from? And so, yes, we're getting into some pretty deep esoteric and, yes, dark layers here. So it's a sacrifice for the collective good, potentially, but is this really just a distortion of a more holy sacrifice? So instead of a voluntary offering of love, it's more forced, fear-based sacrifice to feed this inverted system. So again, we can look at this and interpret it through different lenses, but what's really going on here? So there are 80,000 people, I don't know if I said that, in the desert, roughly 70 to 80,000 in any given year that go to Burning Man. So that's a lot of people. And again, the name of the desert is Black Rock. They call it Black Rock City, or at least this region is Black Rock City. This is what they call it. And Black Rock is a huge global company with tentacles that leach into pretty much every company you could imagine. Between that and Vanguard, they own basically everything in the world. So why is Burning Man, which is meant to be a rejection of the man, the patriarchy, the matrix, the system, why is it held at a place called Black Rock? Very curious to me. Why is it shaped like Saturn's rings at that location? Very curious to me. So again, burned on Saturday, Saturn Day, that right there, ritual sacrifice. But there's also this idea of Saturnian consumption. So, if this is a stand-in for humanity and it gets burned, it's like, okay, we can say it as a symbol of burning the ego, the false identity, the collective shadow. We're burning that away. But because it is bound to Saturn, this time control limitation, rather than to Christ, let's say, freedom, eternal life, this is really reinforcing false sacrifice, false timelines even. And then when you look at it at this from this perspective, through this lens of just burning all of this life force energy that was put into putting on this event, that is temporary, that is not lasting, that is not very sustainable. So much time, energy, resources is put into this event by thousands, tens of thousands of people. Is this illusion of very valuable high level energy? Because the origins of this event started in San Francisco in the tech industry, right? So the like Google actually is responsible for spreading it. And it's very interesting because as I said earlier, it kind of took off like wildfire around the world. There are regional Burning Mans around the world. This is not just about a one-off event in the desert in the summer in Nevada. It is actually a global culture, right? So how did its tentacles even reach so far and so wide? Yes, it's stirring something deep within in its lighter aspect in the ethos that a lot of people do associate with it that does draw them in. There's this genuine intention for so many to really seek outside of the matrix for answers. But again, they're seeking outside of themselves, not seeking within, not connecting with the true Christ flame. So, why is so much energy put into this event only to be consumed, only to be taken down again? It seems like a cycle that keeps people spinning rather than putting all of that life force energy into building something more beautiful, building something more sustainable for the betterment of humanity. People are giving so much time, energy, resources to this event that just disappears year after year. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And so there is this Luciferic glamour, I feel, that has cloaked itself in this freedom, art, expression, community, forward thinking, progressive, innovative ideas coming together to share ideas. And yes, there can be real value in a lot of that. But at the core is this burning of the man, and that's a symbolic act of that echoes truly these ancient Saturnian blood sacrifice rites, only without overt blood, although yes, there has been actual um, unfortunate self-chosen sacrifice. And so, yeah, it's actually been spilled in the past blood. But, instead of life force energy, instead of life, it's life force energy that is being sacrificed, that is being burned at the altar, right? That's the offering, and it's being loosed, I feel. All right, had to take a little break there, but before we dive back in, I do want to address my garb. Yes, this robe is something that I got at one of these events, and I think it's really beautiful. So I just thought I would honor the occasion and dress up with all of my jewelry and sparkles and whatnot. And yes, part of that is that self-expression coming through, but a lot of people take it to extreme. And, how individual are they really being when everybody starts to look the same? Lots of girls wearing less and less clothes, some kind of bikini type looking futuristic Mad Max getup paired with 8-inch platform, buckle up boots, and the same corners. Everybody starts to look the same. There's this Mad Max vibe or this kind of I'm gonna wear my shiny leggings with, this furry robe, and everybody literally starts to look the same. There's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with that, but it's like, okay, how much is it really self-expression when you're basically just fitting a different mold? So I did want to address that aspect of it because there is this, again, there's this overlay of the glamour and the ego. And it's kind of like, okay, how sexy and cool can I look in this way? This is an excuse to wear very little, but also kind of, dress a little avant-garde and different from the Matrix, but there's still a show being put on for the gram half the time, right? And I love dressing up, so it's not about knocking that, but it's like, okay, how much of that is just starting to look like the Burning Man vibe versus truly your soul's self-expression, right? So there's the nuance, there's the fine line. And then yeah, some of those the gear and the special garb, it costs lots of money in many cases. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars in many cases for these fancy Burning Man getups. So it's quite interesting, honestly. There's literally an entire Burning Man economy behind the scenes. So, yeah, just another layer that I wanted to address there. So, let's just quickly recap the origins. So, we have this Wicker Man Saturnian sacrifice energy that's been kind of driving this. And as I've mentioned, the origins were in San Francisco and it was popularized by none other than Google execs, which is kind of interesting. But there's this clear lineage of tech influence running as the undercurrent of this community, of this festival, of the culture itself. There's a lot of tech bros, a lot of crypto bros, and that's not necessarily inherently bad or anything. However, one has to start to wonder with the rise of AI if there is some subtle transhumanist undercurrent as part of this because of that, the Luciferic, Ahrimanic, Satanic, there's the different influences. There's this undercurrent that is driving it. So is there something there to start to question? And then how does this interact with the idea of spiritual transcendence, having a life-changing experience, but if you're doing it through drugs and, connecting then with artificial intelligence, is there literally perhaps an artificial intelligence overlay in the eighth sphere, in the astral sphere, that people are more liable to connect with when they're there, rather than having this transcendent experience through the Christ frequency? Are they getting trapped in the astral, in the eighth sphere, with the false alien consciousness, for example, the false artificial intelligence AI clones, for example? So this is a layer that I've really kind of contemplated in general with the use of any kind of substances, and then thinking about it as I'm speaking, I feel that there's very possibly an overlay there, or there has been, where people who are there are not connecting with what they think they are, generally speaking. So the Wicker Man and Burning Man, basically, they're both reenacting this ancient ritual of binding humanity in an effigy and burning it under the gaze of Saturn, Satan even. So it's masquerading as this cathartic, liberating kind of experience, but beneath it is this false sacrifice energy, this false sacrifice archetype. And it's offering human life force energy to Saturn, but it's not, that true offering through the heart of Christ, right? And so this is where we have to just get really discerning. So discernment is the initiation of our time. And having said that many times myself, there's also this reality that you can't have any kind of discernment if you've got a black magic overlay over you. It's just not there. You have blinders on. There's a glamour over your field where you can't even see, truth, fact from fiction. You can't see it when there's this overlay there, but you've got to have enough wherewithal to take a step back and say, wait a second. And once you start to pull your energy back within and start to question, and maybe there's nothing there, but once you start to really do that inquiry, that's when things can shift and that's when things can become apparent. I had blinders on when it came to the false healer. Everybody else saw it but me, because I was entangled energetically with that energy field, with that dark energy field that wasn't allowing me to see it because I was being siphoned. They didn't want me to see it. That's how black magic works, right? And so a lot of people will not see it. They will not want to see it. And people they don't see things until they're ready to. And sometimes that requires another dark night of the soul, another rock bottom to really acknowledge, to really face those shadows that the ego was entangled with, No blame or shame. It's part of the journey. that we have been in, but we're here to break free of those cycles. So part of this, I feel, is breaking free from the glamour and the illusion that Burning Man is actually a path of liberation and freedom and genuine self-expression. I believe that there is, for, the vast majority, there is an overlay there. So it's binding people energetically to the old death cults under the guise of freedom. And that's literally antithetical to what it's meant to be about, right? So again, just to reiterate, the Saturnian energy is an energy of harvest, time, judgment, sacrifice. It demands payment, restriction, or a burning away of life force. So it should be a burning away of the false illusions, a burning away of the structures that keep us trapped, not a burning away of life force energy. And this is where that inherent distortion comes in, right? So are we going to continue giving our life force energy to have it be burned away rather than building something that is sustainable, building something that will truly serve humanity? So this is the distinction. This is the nuance. Maybe it's time to start taking our life force energy back from these festivals. Not to say that we can't have fun, but where the energy is literally to burn life force. Maybe we should begin to take our energy back from that and begin to put it towards actually building. And we all get to have a little fun, but damn, there is a lot of work to do. Humanity is suffering. So is it really truly for the highest good for all these tech bros, these millionaires and billionaires to just be gallivanting around the freaking desert when humanity is suffering, when humanity is literally burning, the world is burning, communities are burning? I mean, I don't know. The more that I've spoken into this, the more I'm like, wow, this is really distorted. So basically, it represents humanity bound in a false structure, this like wicker cage that is consumed by fire that is not of divine transformation, but of ritual domination, of ritual entrapment. So then we have on the final night, we have the temple burn. So the temple is this huge structure, kind of like a temple, built of raw wood where people will go. And it's like a blank slate at the beginning of the week when they build it. And people will go throughout the week with marker, with pen, with notes that they nail or pin on. People reported seeing a wedding dress with the word fraud written on it. So people put their pain, their trauma, their past wounds, they write it on. So at the end of the week, on the Sunday night, they burn it. It's meant to be this ritual release, the catharsis of the actual emotional trauma, baggage, pain, wounding. Some people will put photographs of their past that they don't want to hang on to, memories that they don't want to hang on to anymore, things of that nature. So it's kind of like a temple of pain. And one has to wonder, in light of everything else, all of the deeper symbolism of the ritual, is this more of a looshing of that pain, of that trauma? How many people truly feel release, catharsis, redemption, actually release? That's a distortion in and of itself. When you lease something, you are basically creating a contract, right? To rent something or to lease it, right? To use it. When you release something, you're re-upping that contract. So I feel that actually might encompass the energy that's going on here. Instead of clearing, instead of letting go, they're releasing it. They're binding themselves in another contract energetically to continue to be loosed from, to harvested from. Because how many people are really going to do that deeper inner work in conjunction with a temple burn? I mean, a lot of people might, but not everybody's going to have the wherewithal and the emotional intelligence and capacity to recognize that they have got to actually do that deeper inner shadow work or whatever their process might be, the nervous system regulation to be able to truly integrate and clear that trauma. And so basically, what I'm getting at is that this is a huge bypass. This whole culture, this whole festival winds up creating a culture of bypass that a lot of people don't realize they're participating in. Even the whole poly thing, you do you, but if you're really on the path of spiritual liberation and transcendence, I personally don't feel that is the way. It is a way to mask your wounds under the guise of open love, but really you're opening yourself up to more energy, more unintegrated, leaky sexual energy, and more trauma and pain. So, chasing unity, love, oneness, but through chemicals, through hypersexuality, through glamour magic. Is that really the path? Is that really the way? I believe that keeps people trapped in a lower chakra loop. And so, again, that idea of karmic looping through Saturn. So, the Burning Man archetype kind of becomes this false king ritual. It's a sacrifice of your sovereignty, ultimately, collapsing into this groupthink that is disguised as radical individualism. There we have that term radical again. Radical monogamy, radical individualism, but it's really not, you know? There is this groupthink mentality, even though it might be going in the direction that we think is more aligned with, a heaven on earth mentality, new earth mentality, but it's very much not in alignment with the values of Christ, Sophia, God source. So is that really the direction that we want to go in? So contrasting with the Christ fire, Sophia flame energy, the true solar codes, that's what true liberation comes through. That's where our true sovereignty comes from. It is not consumptive. It is empowering and expansive. And it helps us to actually build and to continue building for ourselves the internal structures that will help to fortify our foundation. And that in turn, as within, so without, becomes a physically manifested, physically created through us once we have purified our vessels and become embodied in that frequency of what it truly means to be liberated and sovereign and truly self-expressed. It really has nothing to do with the robes you wear. Nothing whatsoever. I went through a phase of wearing the goddess dresses, but honestly, in Tulum, it was practical to wear free-flowing dresses because it was so freaking hot and humid most of the time. But typically, I like to dress kind of normally. Call me normie if you want. I am not at my soul level, and I'm okay looking like that externally. I don't really care, right? So, we're getting now to contrast again a little deeper into that Christ versus Saturn. So Christ representing that voluntary offering, eternal resurrection of the spirit and true liberation, while Saturn represents more of this kind of enforced sacrifice. We're bound to time. And again, we see that in the clock, even symbolically represented in the way they construct Black Rock City, and control through the death and rebirth cycles. So the Wicker Man Burning Man ritual recycles this Saturnian template of forced sacrifice, and it's actually appeasing the system, not burning it down. So it's kind of an ironic inversion of what people think it's meant to be about, what they think they're giving their energy to. It's actually kind of the polar opposite. So again, inversion of Grail fire as well. So the true divine fire, the solar logos, the Christ flame. This is what truly purifies, illumines, and liberates. The Saturnian fire, however, consumes, it binds, and it harvests energy. So they both look potentially the same, or like transformation by fire, that alchemy in action. But the energetic signatures underlying them are completely different. They differ very, very dramatically. So, me back to my dream at the beginning, the Wicker Man was following me. It was creepy. And I kind of feel it was symbolic of this like this structure, this Saturnian inversion, trying to maybe not just me, but kind of follow people and keep them trapped, trying to claim them, trying to entrap them in the looping, in the system, in that old matrix, right? So it's that same old paradigm of false sacrifice and release, right? Continuing to re-up the lease, the contract, the karmic contracts. So ultimately, it's mimicking ancient rites, but stripping them of their true, deeper, organic sacredness. And this is then leaving people open to parasitic hijack. I experienced some of that myself when I was in one of the festivals that was, basically the same type of energy, the same community, lots of lovely, wonderful people. And it was a beautiful experience in the Sahara Desert. It was an incredibly unique and wonderful experience that I absolutely do not regret and do not feel it was a waste of my time, money, energy, or resources. However, I did learn lessons. We did a mushroom ceremony one night, and everybody lay there and open up right next to each other. And at that time, like I knew about entities and stuff, but I still wasn't totally aware of just how open I was opening myself up to the field, and how other people's energies might get, they might be able to hook into my energy field. And sure enough, the next day I was completely discombobulated, super dizzy, super off, not myself. And I felt really destabilized energetically after that experience. And needless to say, it was kind of exhausting. Any of these festivals, however many days they are, they get really tiring. And yes, I do a little shrooms because that helps me to stay awake. I love to dance. Your girl loves to dance. I have the best times dancing. I love DJs. And so I fully, thoroughly have enjoyed myself at these festivals. I have so much fun. And I have to be honest with myself and real with myself that they really take a toll on my physical well-being sometimes as well, but energetically, I'm so depleted after them. And so I have to be super mindful about how I engage in those events. Like if I have a DJ that I love, it's very few and far between these days. I can't say never because back in April, I had a fun, cheeky night out. And, but yeah, I haven't really since then. I dance in my room. I dance in the kitchen. I still dance. I listen to my favorite songs on Spotify or whatever, and yeah, I still enjoy myself, but not in the same way. And part of me misses it. I'll be honest, part of me does miss that. But I also know that there's ways to cultivate that in your life without having to fully immerse in the rest of the distorted frequency and energy that often comes along with it. So the Luciferic Glamour overlay, they basically festivals are selling transcendence through aesthetics, spectacle, drugs, sexuality as well, but none of it is really anchored in true alchemy. So this is where the path lies. This is the path of mastery that we're meant to be walking, and that is about the inner work first and foremost, and quite the opposite, which is disentangling ourselves from external energies. So when we go to these places and open ourselves up, I don't want to say we undo the work, but we've got to be very mindful of clearing our field and having the wherewithal to do that. Anybody who's been to Burning Man, who's might be watching this, who's there right now as I record and maybe seeing this right after, clear your field. If you don't have the tools, I have all the resources down below. Psychic Defense Masterclass and energetic clearing, all the resources, or figure out where else. I also do the one-on-ones to really do the deep dive into clearing the karmic looping and the hooks, the cords, the ties, the entanglements, the entities, that kind of stuff, as well as womb sovereignty. Anybody who has experienced a little bit of that infiltration, whether through festivals or not. But yes, like this is the time to really anchor into mastery. And I feel the timing of this festival is also very interesting right before Labor Day, the last week of August leading into early September, which is Virgo season, coming right off the heels of True Lion's Gate, where we've been activated all summer. The last few years in particular, I'm like, I would never have survived Burning Man at this time. You know, TMI or not, like I actually had my cycle this week. You know, how hellish would that have been? A lot of people say it looks like hell on earth, right? And that actually happened I think a couple years ago. I was like, wow, it's a darn good thing I'm not there because that would have sucked. And no, I don't mess with hormones. So, it's like it's interesting layers like this that I'm like, wow, I am really not meant to be there because I am meant to be integrating the potent energies that I have been activated with through the summer and purifying my field at this time. Quite the opposite energy. Purifying for the purpose of integration and embodiment. That's what Virgo is about. It's about embodiment, it's about mastery. And then we're moving into Labor Day. So I just feel, it's the Saturday before Labor Day, they do the burning of the man. And so I do think there's an interesting correlation with that because Labor Day is about celebrating the labor force, right? So kind of an interesting nuance to consider with that. And then the Saturnian undertones, of course, the collective ritual on Saturn Day, Wicker Man, Burning Man, it's binding. It's not clearing, right? So, and then we have the time loops, the karmic loops, soul harvesting, recycling, and trafficking. As I mentioned, I didn't go super deep into that, but I think you kind of catch my drift based on everything else that we've been discussing here, where people are opening themselves and getting entangled and trapped and potentially even harvested and trafficked at a soul frequency level when they go to this place and open up. And it's kind of a dark reality, but retrieval is always possible. God overcomes all. Christ overcomes all. So when you return to that frequency, nothing can stop you from coming back into your authority and sovereignty. So just want to put that because this is not about fear. This is about just awareness and really, again, stepping into that mastery. So true liberation is really about embodying that Christ flame, the emerald heart, the grail. It's about inner sovereignty, not about the outer spectacle. And honestly, the more that I'm so glad that I was able to experience that. I feel I had to move through a lot of these layers, I didn't totally get entangled in the new age distortions, but I was exposed to them. And I didn't stay in any of them long, but I feel I was meant to move through a lot of them so that I could get the data, that I could really not just witness it, but kind of experience it on a visceral level, both the good and the bad, the glamour and the shadow. And to really have that embodied understanding of why it's also not in alignment for our ultimate highest soul evolution. So everybody's on their own path, but I am sharing this from the perspective that, if you're genuinely on the path of wanting to embody your highest self, really stepping into mastery, embodying your mission to be of highest service to God, Christ, Sophia frequencies coming through divine union, grail union. Sometimes we've got to wash ourselves off of these energies that can come through these distortions. And I'm not saying every single festival is distorted. I'm not saying every single person or union that may have come through these types of events is distorted. I am not suggesting that. What I am suggesting, though, is a lot of people go in unawares. like I did to a degree, and they become exposed, they become entangled energetically and trapped potentially, and they don't even understand. They don't see that they're in loops. And so, if you can have the wherewithal to take yourself out of the loop, you're a step ahead of the game. And this is how we begin to literally actually break the matrix. And again, to channel that energy into building something new, building something more beautiful, building something lasting that truly serves humanity. This is the energy that I would like to see more of. So, I'm just going to finish this off. I am very sensitive and I am more protected now, esoterically, energetically. I know I was blocked from going, and that it wasn't aligning for very, very clear reasons to me. However, I would potentially go as a curiosity, kind of for research witnessing purposes, maybe as like a weekend warrior. Judge me all you want. People would say, oh, you won't have the true experience that way. Well, honestly, I'm not really looking to have another initiation willingly by choice. I am getting plenty of those through God, through life, So it would really just be about that. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if, I kind of feel like it's had its day. I wouldn't be surprised if in future years it doesn't really last much longer, honestly. I'm not saying I want to see that happen for all the people who love it. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised. And certainly I'm suspect of the weather. Don't want to deal with the mud, right? That just does not sound fun. So, yes, I hope that this came through coherently. I hope this resonated with certain individuals, whether you've been or have been to other festivals or not at all. I would be super curious to hear how this has landed for you, what your experience at festivals has been like if you have been, what your experience at Burning Man has been like if you have been, whether you agree or disagree. I would love to hear your perspectives if you had a super, super, super positive experience, but also, just share all the dirt. Literally, all the dirt. I would be so curious to hear in the comments below and have a real conversation about this because I also know that part of it is having conversations, like very interesting conversations. But again, looking at the esoteric energetic layers, is there another container where these conversations may be a little bit more productive? Is kind of the other inquiry I would then inject there, right? So, my next episode, which may be coming very shortly, is going to be some kind of reflection on my journey because this is a big birthday for me. So it is my, if you want to call it solar return, another, rotation around the sun, if you believe that. Whatever the truth of our reality is. The calendar says I'm another year older as of next Friday. And yes, so I am going to be discussing the activations that I have been through this summer in particular, because I feel I have been receiving a lot of the bigger pieces of the puzzle, kind of, I don't want to say final, but some of the final pieces for major loops in my life. And yeah, at the start of the decade, I had a real big experience. If you've been with me, you might be able to guess, but yeah, it has been a doozy of a decade. So let's see what comes through in that episode. I so appreciate the like, subscribes, comments, shares, follows, all the engagement. And if you're enjoying the content, just please support my channel by engaging in any way, shape, or form and sharing. It really does help this get out there. And again, if you want to go deeper with the clearing, with the inner temple, with the one-on-ones, all of that information will be listed below. By the way, the psychic defense and energetic clearing is inside the inner temple, Illumina Inner Temple. And it's very accessible. Plus, you get a bunch of other content content. So there's tons of value in there, and it's at a super, super accessible price right now, which will probably go up in the near future, plus monthly activations with that through the organic streams of consciousness, to be clear. So, thank you so much for being here. Onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth, and I will see you soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Heart of Truth podcast with your host, Amanda Erin Kelly. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review on your favorite platform. And if you'd like to go deeper, grab your copy of my book, Let There Be Light, and join us inside the free community in Illumina Wisdom School, where you can access free resources to jumpstart your journey, such as a higher self activation and the Body Temple Blueprint Masterclass, as well as explore the plethora of resources, including Awakening Fundamentals and Luminary, my signature path to wholeness and mastery, to help you become your own healer and sovereign authority. You can access everything at thisartcalledlife.com or find the links down in the show notes below. Until next time, onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth.